Thus, the latest Parsi interpreter of the Gathas refuses, for reasons of piety, to admit that such a trivial thing as cattle raising could be mentioned in sacred hymns. Therefore, he concludes, it can only be by allegory. In this way, some vivid texts are emptied of their sap, and we are supposed to accept Zoroaster as a dreamer or a pure mystic. Actually, Zoroaster's thought is in contact with the humble realities of a rather primitive society. The pious Parsis must resign themselves to the fact that the human horizon of their prophet remains limited. I will add, provincial. The prince whom Zoroaster went over to his views, Prince Vistashpa, must indeed have reigned over a distant region of eastern Iran, far from all contact with a great empire, apparently before the time when Cyrus and Darius assembled the whole of Iran under their scepter and extended their dominion to India, Egypt, and as far as the Greek towns of Asia Minor. It has several times been tried in vain to identify this Vitashpa with his namesake, the father of Darius. But as Zoroaster's political horizon is limited, the conception of his message has a truly cosmic scope. Vitashpa's kingdom, lost in the confines of the steppe, becomes, through Zoroaster, a city of God, at least virtually. To the multitude which comes to hear him, the prophet preaches and announces the kingdom of justice, the cooperation with the work of God. On pain of total punishment, his passionate and exclamatory preaching is animated throughout by the presence of a God, while he incessantly entreats and beseeches, and who reveals himself. It recalls the tone of the prophets of Israel, from which, however, it differs. Zoroaster knows that the God speaks through his mouth. He sometimes doubts his own mission as a prophet, but only to ask his God at once to strengthen his certainty. For at bottom, his confidence in Har Mazda, he has recognized him in a series of visions as the Holy Land. And this holiness is not terrible holiness of Jehovah. Speak to me, he says to the wise Lord, as a friend to friend. Grant us support which friend would give to friend. He expects this benevolent help from him because it is part of the relationship which conceives between God and mankind, nay, of the very nature of God. However, his doctrine and his spirit remain different from those of Christianity. Far from enjoining forgiveness of trespasses, Zoroaster preaches it is important to ill-treat the wicked, as it is to be good to the good. His God is not yet a God of mercy. He is still the God of justice. It should be noted, however, that in the relation to the traditional gods of ancient Iran, the just God of Zoroaster represented a progress. Previously, the god was a sort of despot, tyrannical but amenable to flattery and gifts. With the wise Lord, law replaces caprice, and the obligation to make life hard for the wicked is a positive moral rule. Indeed, Zoroaster appears sometimes to be frightened by the rigor of the law, losing confidence in his own virtue. He implores the pity of the Lord, and he promises the faithful to intercede with him in their favor at the great judgment. But Zoroaster certainly surmised nothing of the sublime paradoxes of the Sermon on the Mount. It seems that he has not even known the grave problem which tormented Job, the problem of the righteous sufferer. For Zoroaster, righteousness led to bliss. He does sometimes ask the Lord rather pathetically for reassurance on this point, but on the whole, he is certain of the final beatitude of the righteous, and is, therefore, willing to suffer among men. But what is this suffering? It will be remembered that at first he had to flee, but thanks to Vitashpa, he knew success. It must be said that from this moment, Zoroaster is a prosperous prophet. The only vexation of which he complains expressly does not amount to much. One day, when traveling on a wintry road, he was refused hospitality by the favorite of a prince. For this he bears him a grudge, and he predicts his punishment on the day of judgment, when the good will be sorted out from the wicked. The minion of the prince, at the bridge of the winter, offended Zarathustra's Spitama by refusing him shelter. When he and his beast of burden came to him shivering of cold, thus does the evil one's conscience forfeit their assurance of the straight path. His soul, stripped bare, shall fear at the bridge of the separator, having strayed from the path of righteousness, by its deeds and those of his tongue. Altogether in Zoroaster's system, suffering not hold the essential place it occupies in the Christian theology, which centers on a crucifixion, or in the Gnostic pessimism, for which the whole universe, including the God who made it, is evil. At the origin of Zoroaster's universe there is not a fall, there is a choice, but man is the victim of the evil spirit whose unhappy choice has disturbed the universe. But what is this evil spirit, and what is the moral system, which is the same time physical? It is time for us to try and analyze Zoroaster's message and its essential traits. If this message is to have a meaning, it is necessary, and perhaps sufficient, that we should forget many things. Let us then forget our sciences and increasingly marked separation which they have caused between man and the universe, between thought and life. We will even forget our philosophies, or rather imagine a sort of primitive, naive, very ancient philosophy. Zoroaster's thought will then appear natural to us, and yet we shall see the originality of the prophet and stand out against the background of this common mentality. A very few simple and very widespread ideas seem to me sufficient to constitute this primitive philosophy, which is, to repeat Simone Petrament's expression, much more ancient than one thinks. They are those of beginning, totality, struggle, escape, and choice. They are the current on the most diverse levels of thought, and I find them in the least civilized of men, naturally in non-explicit form. Primitive man does not indulge in speculation. He is too much occupied with living. He is engaged in his action and bound to his collectivity. But watching him live, we perceive the mental attitude which rules his existence. We see, then, that the life of the primitive is passed in the performing actions and imitations of his elders, and who have themselves learnt from their forefathers. One acts as one has always acted. The success of all actions, necessary to the subsistence of the individual and the group, is ensured by their conforming to patterns. The primitive believes these patterns to have really existed before time began, in the form of mythical events. This seems to be the very core of mythology. One might refer to Malinowski, Levi-Brule, Iliad. As the first natural category, we have the primordial pattern. The second category is that of totality. Nothing is easier or more widespread to conceive totality. How often do we hear absolutely general statements like these? The world is badly made, life is sweet, etc. Judgments in which the person who speaks as the universe of which he is a part of are compromised in a single indistinct grasp. A similar conception is to be observed in all the religions. Man communicates with the whole. He influences the cosmic powers.